Something remarkable must be taking place in the cortical region of your brain at this point. But so far, no one has monitored the brain correlates of this shift using magnetic resonance imaging or an electroencephalograph. This physical sensation on the top of the head is symptomatic of a shift in your nervous system or network of vital energies that is correlated with gaining freedom from mental dysfunction, a general state of mental imbalance characterized by stiffness, rigidity, and unwieldiness. Consequently, you achieve a state of mental pliancy in which your mind is fit and supple like never before. From a contemplative perspective, when the mind is dysfunctional or prone to laxity and excitation, it is hard to generate enthusiasm for healing the afflictions of your mind or for devoting yourself to virtuous mental activity. Once you are free of such mental dysfunction, you can focus your mind without resistance on any meaningful object or task. And such a mind is now set to be fit or serviceable. This is the key to achieving optimal mental performance. Following this sense of pressure on the top of your head, you experience the movement of vital energies moving in your body. And when they have coursed everywhere throughout your body, you feel as if you are filled with the power of this dynamic energy. You are now free of physical dysfunction, so your body feels buoyant and light like never before. So again, that's symbolized by the person flying through the sky. Both your body and mind are now imbued with an exceptional degree of pliancy, which makes them remarkably fit for engaging in all kinds of mental training and other meaningful activities. When physical pliancy initially arises, the vital energies catalyze an extraordinary sense of physical bliss, which then triggers an equally exceptional experience of mental bliss. This rush of physical and mental rapture is transient, which is a good thing, for it so captivates the attention you can do little else except enjoy it. Gradually it subsides and you are freed from the turbulence caused by this intense joy. Your attention settles down in perfect stability and clarity. You have now achieved shamatha. Sounds pretty good. Before we go back to the text, is there any, we haven't gone through this chart in any detail, but is there anything in particular anyone would like to ask about the chart?
The monkey disappears at stage 23.
Yeah, so the monkey, so we see, remember the monkey is discursive thought. And so at stage 7 here, we see that the meditator is saying goodbye to the monkey. And there's hardly any black on the back of the elephant. So at stage 7, what's happening is now we're at a point where we focus on the object very well, and if there's any little hint of subtle agitation, so that's the monkey, any hint of subtle dullness, that's a little bit of black on the elephant, we can immediately dispel it. And then by stage 8, no more black on the elephant, monkey's gone. So by stage 8, now all we need to do is put a little bit of effort to start the meditation, and the meditation runs flawlessly without any little hint of agitation or dullness. Yeah, so the rabbit, again, is subtle dullness. So we see by stage 6 here, the rabbit is disappeared, meaning by stage 6 now we can quickly identify subtle dullness and dispel it. But over stage 4, 5 and 6 here, 3, 4 and 5 rather, we were having to identify this to really start to work with it. Is a stage irreversible? If we go to the gym and achieve a certain level of mental fitness and we stop going to the gym, is it irreversible? Probably not. Similarly here, if we get to a certain stage and we stop training, we'll probably slowly go backwards. But a little bit like the gym, we need a lot of effort to get to a certain level of mental, physical fitness, but then to maintain that, we just need a certain minimum level to maintain. If we want to go further, more effort. So similarly here, if we get to a certain level, we need to have a certain level of training to maintain, but then more if we want to go further. So a similar idea. One thing I want to mention, then we'll go back to the text. The monkey in the tree. Halfway up on the left, we see the monkey in the tree grabbing some fruit, and we see number 19 underneath. And if we go over on the page on number 19, it says, since virtuous thoughts are an interruption at the time of shamatha meditation, it is necessary to stop them. At other times, it is not necessary. As a beginner, this is not really a problem, because we have a lot of other distractions. But here, in these middling stages, stage 5, 4, 5, 6, 7, and so forth, our mind is really getting very calm, very clear. And what's happening is that because now our mind is less and less caught up in mental afflictions, it's becoming more calm and clear, we are now creating a space for a lot of creativity to come up. So what you'll notice over these middling stages, you're meditating and then all of a sudden all these great ideas just start popping up out of nowhere. And what this is saying is that's not the right time to entertain these thoughts. That if some great idea comes up, then we go, okay, I'll attend to that after the meditation, and we go back to the practice. Because if we entertain it, then it's just another distraction. If we're worried about forgetting it, we can even have a little notepad next to where we meditate, jot down a few key words, and go back to the practice. So that's what the monkey is. One more thing, and then we'll go to the text. Up the top here, we see now the top on the right. We see the meditator on the elephant of the mind. Now we see the flame, meaning more effort. And now in their right hand is a sword. This is a sword of wisdom. So this is the Vipassana practice. So on the basis of shamatha, we can effectively engage in Vipassana practice. What this doesn't mean, of course, is that we need to first achieve shamatha before we begin the Vipassana practice. But what it does mean is if we don't put some effort into shamatha practice and we jump straight to Vipassana, I think we can put a lot of time and energy into Vipassana practice and not really get anywhere because our mind is completely distracted and completely dull. And in the end, if we really want to penetrate nature of reality, nature of the mind, we need to unify the two, shamatha Vipassana. Okay, let's go back to the text now. A few more things to talk about. So we're in that paragraph where it's no matter how stable, there's one sentence there we haven't covered. It says, it, meaning shamatha, is the source of many excellent qualities such as extrasensory perception and paranormal abilities, and in particular the Arya paths of all three vehicles are attained in dependence upon it. So what we find is that once our mind becomes very calm and clear, the mind of shamatha, and in particular if we develop those higher levels of concentration, the jhanas, we can develop abilities which now we would categorize as paranormal ability, extrasensory perception, that we now, due to the mind being very refined and clear, we can start to experience and see things which we now is impossible. Like, for example, seeing other people's minds and so forth. So that we can develop in those high levels of concentration. But of course, the goal of shamatha is not to have that, but as it said here, it says, in particular, the Arya paths of all three vehicles are attained in dependence upon it. So here, what this means, an Arya is anyone who has had a direct realization of emptiness. Meaning, if we want to have a direct realization of emptiness in the Vipassana practice, we need a very stable and clear mind. We need the mind of shamatha. Anything less than that, our mind is not stable and clear enough to be able to directly penetrate nature of reality. At best, we can have some experience of emptiness that can have a positive effect on us, but it'll wear off. If we really want to come to a direct realization of nature of mind or emptiness, we need shamatha. So that's what it said, that's what's being said here. And then in the last two paragraphs he says, in that way, the ultimate nature of the mind can indeed be directly and clearly seen. However, it cannot be grasped or indicated saying, it is this. Rest loosely without grasping to whatever dawns. So what he's saying here is that following these sorts of instructions, you could actually come to a realization of the ultimate nature of mind, the emptiness of the mind. And again, of course, that realization of the ultimate nature of the mind, we can't say it's this, it's that, because in fact, the realization of emptiness is a completely non-dualistic experience. So if we have a realization of emptiness direct, and we come out of that experience and someone asks us, please explain what you experienced, we'd sort of go, well, it was sort of like this, sort of like that. You can't say it was this, it was that. Because language is conceptual, dualistic. We can't describe a non-dualistic experience with dualistic language. So that's what's being said here. And now this last paragraph is interesting. He says, the meditators of present-day Tibet, so present-day Tibet was, of course, at the time of the Panchen Lama, which is 16th, 17th century, he says, are mostly of a single mind in proclaiming, these are oral instructions that put Buddha in the palm of your hand. So what he's saying is that these instructions that we have been looking at here in shamatha, such as previously here this instruction of rest loosely without grasping to whatever dawns, he's saying that these instructions, many of the meditators of his day were saying these instructions will put Buddha in the palm of your hand, meaning that these instructions are the ones that are going to lead you to enlightenment. Meaning that these instructions are going to lead you to realize the ultimate nature of the mind. But the Panchen Lama says something different. He says, nevertheless, I, Chögyam Gyaltsen, say that this approach, what we've been looking at here, is a marvellous, skillful methods for beginners to accomplish mental stillness, and is a way to introduce the conventional nature of the mind. So what he's saying is that this may be true, that these instructions could lead you to realise the ultimate nature of the mind. However, what they will definitely help you to do for beginners is to accomplish mental stillness, meaning to accomplish shamatha, and a way to introduce the conventional nature of the mind. So remember, conventional nature of the mind is clear and knowing. So he's saying that definitely these instructions will lead us to the goal of shamatha, where we'll see the clear and knowing nature of the mind. I think what he's suggesting is that, therefore, whether or not these instructions can take you further, not so sure. But definitely, if we follow these instructions, we can move towards the goal of shamatha. Whereas what we're going to see next year when we start to look at some of the oral instructions within the Kagyu Mahamudra tradition, the instructions which are part of Vipassana practice, you'll find a lot of the instructions are very similar to the shamatha instructions that we've just been using here. So this is what he's saying here. So this is then the completion of the shamatha section of Sutra Mahamudra. So then next year we're going to then move on to the Vipassana section, and also then after that what's the conclusion, which is the how to continue the Mahamudra practice post-meditation. So that's also part of the topic for next year. So is there any questions on anything we've covered here today?
I understand, if I understand right, that I need to establish a very good shamatha practice, and just then start with the Vipassana. True?
Okay.
So when exactly I can introduce the Vipassana?
Yeah, okay. So when can I start Vipassana? I think that there's not really a fixed point where, okay, now we do Vipassana. Rather, I think what's being suggested here is, and I like to use the analogy of if we're building a two-storey building where the first floor is shamatha, second floor is Vipassana. So again, what this chart is not saying is that first we need to 100% complete the first floor before we begin the second floor. And we see in building they never do that. But they do have a certain amount of first floor done, because otherwise the try and build the second floor, just collapse. So they have to have a minimum structure at the first floor to support. So similarly for us, we have to have minimum to support. But then, of course, what we do in building is they start the second, but then they keep working on the first floor. And so similarly here, I think, is that, you know, once we start to have a little bit of more stability, clarity, we can start to delve into the Vipassana practice a little bit. But at the same time, continuing to work. It's not like, okay, stop shamatha, let's just go to Vipassana. No, let's do a little bit of Vipassana, good, and keep working on the shamatha. And what you'll find is that, of course, the more you work on shamatha, the better the Vipassana will be. But also, if you start to get a little bit of taste in Vipassana, that's going to be helpful for shamatha. Because a little bit of taste of Vipassana is going to start to subdue the mental afflictions a little bit. Which means that when you go into the shamatha practice, you'll have a less agitated mind doing shamatha. So that will feed back in. And of course, then the more shamatha, that'll feed. So it'll be sort of cycling. They'll support each other. And eventually they'll become what's called unified. So I think that's the strategy. Yeah.
Over the past couple of days, we saw a lot of steps and sub-steps. And
sure.
Going back to the day-to-day, can you please concise them into the essence of the practice? Like if you get into 10 minutes a day, 30 minutes a day, like what you should
okay.
follow?
Yeah, sure. Okay. So we saw in the beginning of the shamatha section here that he said to focus on that for a short while, meaning as a beginner, we should have short sessions. How short will depend on us as an individual, our level of ability. But probably anywhere from 15 minutes to 25, 30 minutes, somewhere in there probably for most of us. Some of us, 15 is probably enough, for others more. So we sort of work out what works for us. One way to know if we're meditating too long is our enthusiasm to meditate the same at the end as it was at the beginning? And if we're meditating a little bit too short is when we're meditating and then our normal experience at the end of the meditation is, oh, it would have been nice to do a bit more. Then we can extend a bit. But that's only if that's our normal experience. But when we extend, we don't want to like double from 20 to 40. 3 to 5 minutes more. So if we're doing, let's say, 15 minutes, and we're finding that most of the time, and we should use a timer, and I'll explain that why in a minute. Most of the time, if 15 minutes are up, we go, oh, it would have been nice to do it more. That's the time maybe to go to 20 minutes. And it's helpful to use a timer, particularly as a beginner. If we don't use a timer, one of two things often happens. On days where, you know, maybe our mind is agitated, irritated, negative, we sit down, we try to get into the practice, but we can't really get into it, we're restless, and we sort of try, and after about 5 or 10 minutes we go, okay, I give up. That's not a good habit to get into. Because in meditation, in daily life in general, every time when things get a bit difficult, if we give up, we're never going to progress in meditation or in our life. So if we set a timer and things are quite difficult, we'll persevere. So we'll develop perseverance when things are difficult. So that's good. The other thing that can happen if we don't have a timer is on other days, maybe things are going really well. And we meditate and go, oh, today it's really well. What do? Oh, let's just keep meditating. I'm enjoying this. And we keep meditating until when? Until it's not going so well, and then we stop. And the thing we remember most about the meditation is how it ended. And if we're always ending in frustration and so forth, we're going to start to associate these experiences with meditation. We're not going to want to meditate again. Whereas if we set a timer and things are going well, and then we stop, that's what we remember. We'll be enthusiastic to meditate the following day. And I've even seen sometimes in a meditation text which says, as soon as your meditation starts to go well, stop. Okay, if it's after 2 minutes, maybe not a good idea. So this is why I think it's helpful to have a timer for these reasons. And again, if you want to meditate longer in the morning, let's say you really want to meditate 30 or 45 minutes, but you can't sustain that, break that 30 minutes into two 15-minute sessions with a little 2-minute break, or 45 into like two 20-minute sessions with a 2-minute break. So always emphasize quality over quantity. And I think in general, particularly as a beginner, it's best, of course, to meditate first thing in the morning, because usually that's when we're most fresh and we can dedicate that time, and it's a good way to start the day. And one of the things we want to do as a beginner is pick a time that works for us and stick to that time. Because one of the most difficult things is just to develop the habit. And if we keep changing the time when we meditate each day, we're not really developing a habit. So pick a time that works for you and really stick to that. And initially, of course, it'll be a bit challenging, but then you'll find over time it becomes habit that it's, say, 6:30 every morning, that's meditation time. And we just do it. And then it becomes easier because we've developed the habit. So that's, I think, helpful. Now, in terms of what to meditate on, so of course here, today, we were mainly focusing on the shamatha practice. This is the basis of Vipassana. What I wouldn't really recommend is only doing shamatha practice, meditation. This is a little bit unbalanced. I think particularly in our modern society, we need to balance this with what's called the compassion wing of practice. Practices such as loving kindness and compassion and empathetic joy and equanimity. Because these practices provide a lot of the fuel for shamatha. And also, they help us to avoid the shamatha practice going astray. Because what can often happen is if we don't engage in these loving kindness, compassion practices, what can happen is if we only do shamatha and we start to get a little bit of taste of clarity and stillness, we can use it as a way of withdrawing from the world. You know, I'm just resting in my little bubble of peace here, getting away from that mess out there. And so we use it to withdraw from the world, and that's not a very healthy thing to do. Because the goal of shamatha is not to withdraw. The goal of shamatha is to have a better state of mind so we can more effectively engage in the world. So therefore, I think we really need to balance, as a beginner, the shamatha with these loving kindness, compassion practices, to have that balance. And then, as we just saw here, then once we start to get into the shamatha practice, then it can be very helpful to move into Vipassana, because then we can get somewhere with the Vipassana, and then if we start to have some experience in Vipassana, that's also going to help boost our shamatha practice. And that Vipassana practice, of course, we're going to be looking at next year. Any more questions? We've still got a little bit of time left.
Is it possible to begin with the focus on awareness itself?
Yeah. So the question is it possible in the shamatha practice just to start with the practice we just did, the resting in awareness? Absolutely. So we don't, again, use the object that works best for you. If you find that resting in awareness is the one that you're drawn to and you really find that that's effective, you can use that from day one. You don't have to go and use the breath or observe the mind. You can just rest in awareness.
As I mentioned earlier, I do a few sitting sessions.
A few sessions.
Sitting sessions.
Sitting, yeah.
Sessions on a daily basis. But I've noticed that the session that I have in the morning, since then, for a few years now, it's always like I'm not tired. I sleep very well, and it's also one of the habits that I did in order to support this.
Very good.
That I changed, because I used to be a night person, and it's
Yeah.
okay. And the thing is that for the first 2 hours in the morning, there's cloud, and it doesn't improve. And I know this, and I'm fine with it also. like,
Okay, yeah, very good.
right?
Yeah, yeah, sure. So what's the advice?
So no. So what I'm saying is that if you from your experience, whether there's also a place for that,
Sure,
for
sure,
the practice.
sure. Yeah, so of course the general recommendation, particularly if we have a normal lifestyle of working 9 to 5 or whatever, is realistically speaking for many people the only really optimum time to meditate is early in the morning. Because we're working most of the day and usually often in the evening we have family responsibilities, other commitments, maybe we're very tired in the evening. So realistically speaking for many people that's about the only option we have. So we're sort of locked into that. But of course if that's not our daily routine, if we don't have that sort of structure in our day and we're more free, then, and the meditation texts sometimes talk about this, is that they talk about different types of physiology of people, and they talk about some people who are more sharp early, these different times of day. And my experience, particularly when I do meditation retreats, is exactly yours. I find that the time of day, as a generalisation, where I'm most sharp is usually about 4 p.m. till about 9 p.m. for me personally. I also find early in the morning I'm quite drowsy even if I've slept well. So then if that's the case and you have an opportunity to do a number of sessions a day, I would put something else there, more active, like loving kindness, compassion, for example, would be very good to do, or vipassana, more active. And then put shamatha at the time of day where you're most focused,
When you talk about
if it's practically possible.
When you talk about loving kindness, you mean metta bhavana?
Yeah, metta bhavana, those sort of practices. So, of course, that's an excellent way to start the day with these practices. So that's what I would do if you have the luxury of having more than one session a day and you can, you have another period of the day where you're more focused and you can dedicate that to shamatha. That would be the good solution. Okay, that's it then. So maybe just 1 or 2 words about next year and then we'll finish with a little dedication. So we've covered the first half of this text now. We've covered the preliminaries, a little bit taste of the Tantra and the Shamatha section. So next year then, same, we'll have a 2-day weekend. We'll go look at the Vipassana practice, and here we'll see both how this is done within the oral Mahamudra tradition in the Kagyu, and also how this is presented through the classic sort of Tsongkhapa Geluk approach. And then we'll look at some instructions on post-meditation, how to continue the Mahamudra practice outside of meditation as well. So that's the topics for next year. So what can be good then is if you want to refresh your understanding of this. Of course, this is all being recorded and you'll have access to that. If you want to go a little bit more into this shamatha practice, then last week I did a 10-day Vipassana retreat in Yetyam, which went through these various practices we did here yesterday and today, the breath, the mind and the awareness. So you can, I think you'll have access to that. True, yes, yes.
Shamatha, you said shamatha retreat.
Yeah, shamatha retreat, yeah. Yeah, so, and also this particular text, this Geluk Mahamudra, on my website I also, normally when I run this, or often I run it in a more extensive way. And so if you want to follow this text in a more extensive way, then on my website there's some audio from when I run this course or retreat in a more extensive way. You can also have a look at that if you want. So that's all I really want to say. So let's just sit quietly for...
Maybe before the dedication. Before the dedication.
Before the dedication.
Yeah, because then we can dedicate.
Well, okay, then I got something before the dedication as well. So then I'd just like to, of course, thank all the volunteers from Dharma Friends who helped to organise and support this weekend. So thank you for all your efforts. Without your efforts, this wouldn't be possible, so thank you very much. I think there are many people involved. And then, of course, lastly, I'd like to thank all of you for coming here this weekend, and hopefully that you've got something out of this text, and if you do,